Hey guys, remember I had done a video talking about the She-Hulk trailer and my thoughts on it, and I, broke down all the various issues, positive aspects, the negative aspects of the trailer, and I really wasn't hopeful on how the TV series was going to go. There were various issues with character development, character personalities, things that didn't make any sense with powers. I was going to watch it regardless of how I felt. I knew from what lacked in the trailer, meaning the original origin story, I knew that was completely scrapped, but I was still going to give it a chance. However, what they did in the actual pilot, there's a particular scene that I'll get up to where Jen and Bruce are arguing and talking about some serious issues, which completely destroyed me any chance of wanting to be continuing with the series, because there were just too many things wrong. The first problem that the series runs into is that the origin story is all contained within the first 35-minute pilot. Now, with the other past live action TV series that Marvel have made, whether you like them or not, WandaVision, Captain America and the Winter Soldier, Loki, they're all been established, characters from the movies. So they have character development, backstory, everything that you can think of. So you don't have to really introduce us to the characters, give them their origin stories. All that stuff is set up, with the exception, of course, Ms. Marvel. She had the exact same problem with She-Hulk. But She-Hulk's story is much more complicated because it now has to, it involves another character, Hulk. We have to bring him in because he's been heavily neglected. But with the changes they've done to the origin story, it really didn't help in any way. And I wish they had stuck to the original one, because I've always said this with a lot of writers. When they alter things, 9 out of 10 times they do not improve, and most of the time they end up making worse, because they introduce us to various different things that make the story break down. And then another problem on top of it is that they're also introducing us to Scar and Sakaar that were initially brought up in Thor Ragnarok, and all that stuff that happened in Hulk, what he was missing for 2 years. So you have all that baggage on top of introducing us to She-Hulk and Jen, her personality. I've always hated that from Marvel, where they have to introduce us to a brand new character and then introduce us to another brand new character. It's like, you need to give your main character focus. I have no problem with you bringing in Scar and whatnot, but if they had simply waited until season 2 to bring in all the Sakaar stuff, especially when it comes to the scene that I will talk about later on, where it makes things worse. It's just, you stuffed so much into this 30 minutes. A lot of all the important stuff, like Jen's origin, are rushed. Things feel like they've been cut out. Characters are not acting like themselves. It almost feels like 2 different people wrote the pilot. Even though one person is for the script, it feels like one person worked on the first half of the script, then another person worked on another half of the script. The series starts off kind of post Jen already becoming She-Hulk, so we get introduced to her already doing her reciting her closing statement into the series. I kind of even suggested that in one of my, ways to actually make the show work more better, was to actually do it more in a flashback, meaning it took place before Infinity War, so we can actually do the proper origin story with Bruce being before Professor Hulk and whatnot. And they did change a couple of things in the opening. She mainly works alone as a lawyer. She doesn't like how Matt works with Foggy, but in this case they changed it so that she actually has a partner. Now, I'm not saying Jen can't have a partner. In a few of the later She-Hulk series, she does have a partner later on, but she mainly works alone. This is so that when Stan Lee wrote the original first issue, it was to showcase who Jen is, how she works as a lawyer. So they changed a lot of things, even just right at the beginning. Another thing that they also added was Nikki, a completely new original character. I think she's her closest friend, because she knows Jen is She-Hulk. She's the first one to tell her. I also kind of got confused why they gave her this new original character, because if you're going to base the series off Sensational She-Hulk, we did already have a character in that comic where she had a secretary slash new friend who was called Wheezy, but they didn't use her at all here. The thing I didn't really care for this scene, this is trying to set up, introduce us to the character, who she is, how she is as a lawyer. But in the comic, it plays out differently. In here, it kind of feels like she's a rookie in the sense, versus in the comic, you can feel that when Stan Lee wrote her, she's very experienced. Now, she has, she's kind of reckless. But at the same time, even though she's not a hero at this point, she's still being very heroic in the court case. Because in the original court case, she was going after Trask. Now, people who don't know, Trask is basically like a Kingpin character in Spider-Man / Daredevil's universe. And he was basically going to, set her for an assassination attempt. These mob bosses are very scared of her, but she also can be reckless, which again runs in the family. Bruce, just like in his original origin story, he's reckless and ran after Rick into the bomb field.
What? I don't have a Savage Jim Walters though.
This is the only reference we're ever going to get to Savage She-Hulk. Like, it's cute and all, but it's more important to actually do this part of the story rather than say, oh, here, we know that it's supposed to be Savage She-Hulk first, then Sensational She-Hulk. And the exposition here is very clunky. The cool thing about Stan Lee is that in just like 2 or 3 pages, he was able to set up who Jen is, what she's doing, and also the stakes that are involved. Well, here, you really don't know who she really is. Is she like an intermediate lawyer? Is she respected, not respected? Because we don't really know anything. And the problem with Nikki, which again, I don't really, like I said before, I don't really have a problem when they introduce us to new characters. But Nikki right now is just information dump. She really doesn't have any other purpose, especially in the pilot episode. Because the episode is so short, it doesn't give any chance for Jen. It doesn't give any chance for Nikki. And the worst thing of all, even though, Jen, of course, is a superhero, we want to focus on, She-Hulk, her attorney side is still an important part of her stories. Different writers here and there change things around. I know Peter David's run, he completely removed the whole attorney side. But for the most part, her being a lawyer is very important to her comic. It should be respected in the series, and it would have been better to us see her in a dramatic court case going against, a mob boss guy, because it would give more of an urgency, more power to Jen, because she's sticking up to what's right, and, seeing her early days of being heroic in her own way. And it's just lost in just this quick 2-minute scene that's trying to be semi-funny. Well, I should really start to talk about the whole comedy act. Now, obviously, the series is based off John Byrne's run, which is the most popular of every version of She-Hulk. No one's really matched that, because he was able to balancing the comedy side and the dramatic serious side. The problem is, the writer doesn't know how far to go. It's always mostly let's make it funny, let's make them quippy, so we can, understand it. But at the same time, we really don't know anything past that. And then when it comes to the dramatics, it falls flat in a lot of cases. Now, timeline-wise, the origin story takes place 2 months before the series started, so roughly 4 months after Endgame. The thing that I really didn't like that, at the end of Endgame, Bruce / Professor Hulk, his arm was badly injured when he used the gauntlet. It's been 4 months. His arm should have been healed. Now, gamma-irradiated characters are not the greatest at healing compared to, say, Wolverine or Deadpool. Nothing beats Deadpool. He can regenerate within seconds, even with limbs are cut off. But Hulk, She-Hulk, they all can regenerate very fast. 4 months is ridiculous, and he should have been already healed. It made no sense that his arm was broken for this long.
Because, I made this little device which keeps me in human form.
Now, obviously, the entire origin story is completely different in the TV series versus the comics. The only thing that's actually retained is that Bruce and Jen are in a car driving home. The problem also is they introduce us to a lot of issues into the origin story. Like the first thing, We know that in Endgame that Bruce basically had figured out a way to combine his mind with Hulk and using various gamma radiations to bombard himself in order to turn him into Professor Hulk, where he retains his mind and whatnot. But he was unable to transform back due to that issue. So they introduced us to this inhibitor thing so that he can be with Jen. This causes a issue later on in the series, and the only reason why this exists so it prevents Bruce from hulking out during this disaster. This is another example of why I wish you do not change origin stories, because when you add things, it complicates the story down the line.
Yes, so you don't get Cheetos fingers.
It's really smart.
You're not the only genius in the family.
I will say one thing. They are trying a decent amount to try to show Jen and Bruce know each other and treat themselves as family. I respect that. It gives them a personality. It's the one thing that the comic did lack. Because again, Bruce was on the run. Rick was missing from this part of the story. And he only had one place to go. Jen, his cousin. He needed help. And so he went to meet her, and he just got mixed up into another fiasco that just unfortunately happened to the both of them. So at least the one positive thing I can say to the scene is that they do try to give Bruce and Jen some interaction so that you know that they do love each other and they do respect each other.
Steve Rogers did not have a girlfriend before he went into the service.
Okay, now this thing, I don't know if it's a joke or not. Jen is obsessed whether Steve Rogers / Captain America has, had sex or dated a girl because of the whole thing where he doesn't have time. And the main problem is because they changed Jen's personality to be like not caring about superheroes. In fact, she hates superheroes. So like, if you hate superheroes, why are you trying to follow Captain America? Why are you interested in his love life? But the main problem with this is that if Jen is so obsessed with someone's love life, the obvious thing that you would think Jen would be talking about is Betty to Bruce, which ironically has been ignored by the writers and the movies for decades. It's just like Betty doesn't exist. And Betty, along with Rick, who got removed from the movies universe as well, are very important to Bruce. And like Jen never brings it up. And I pretty much understand why they didn't bring her up, because this would have been a perfect time to give us information that we didn't have. And there's one reason why, is because if she did talk about Betty, it would have also revealed that Bruce had a wife on a different alien planet, which is where they're setting up Scar and whatnot in the future. We can't spoil that information, so nothing is brought up here.
Captain America wasn't.
Now, in the TV show's origin story, what happens in this is that a Sakaar vessel, as you see over here, spooks them. Jen gets scared, swerves, and crashes the car. That is literally the origin story. Bruce and Jen get injured in the car. His blood spills on top of Jen's injury, and that's how she gets the blood transfusion. There's two issues I have with this. One, this is a lackluster origin story. Jen gets spooked by a ship, and they take a crash, they go out, and that's literally it, and Jen becomes She-Hulk for the first time. In the original origin story, it was a lot more dramatic. But if Trask is really a killer, he may try to silence you permanently. Come on, those things only happen in movies. They stopped in the driveway, that's where she lives. Okay, as soon as she gets out of the car, you know what to do. Jen, you're playing with fire. You're too vulnerable, too unprotected. Now! What was that? Oh, Jen! I'll finish her off. Trask said to make sure. She's barely breathing. Save her somehow. This hose. I've seen cops use it for riot control. It's working, pushing him back. Made it! He couldn't hit us with the water in his eyes. Go after him, man! She may still be alive! No! Too many shots. Too much noise. We gotta split. They tried to kill her and they're getting away? But I've gotta stay calm. Only Banner can help her now. not Hulk. So we have this dramatic moment where Bruce has to do the ultimate decision. Do I let my cousin die from this fatal wound, or do I give her a blood transfusion? He had to make that horrific decision because he didn't know what was going to happen. And the worst thing of all, because of the entire fiasco, cops eventually were called on the scene, and because he broke into this medical facility, he didn't want to be caught, so he turned into Hulk and disappeared and didn't know what happened to his cousin for nearly a year because he was on the run. So you had all this action, dramatic moment for her origin story, and it's all reduced down to this little nonsense. I mean, there's one positive thing with this is that, in the original Hulk comic, beside of him being gray, they originally wanted his powers to only work at night, so it was kind of like a whole vampire aspect. So they kept a little bit of that element there, and it's one of the few things that they actually got from Savage She-Hulk right, because this is her very first time transforming, so she has no control over power, so she just simply runs off. But remember, Bruce is Professor Hulk. He's not regular Hulk where he loses his intelligence, his mind, and go on a rampage. He obviously is inhibitor's damaged, so he's going to turn back into Professor Hulk. Jen has just run off in the Force because she has no idea what the hell she just turned into and has no control of herself. Bruce is just going to turn into Professor Hulk. She's only a couple 100 feet away. Why didn't he go after her? The second issue is that the Sakaar ship that spooked them, later on Bruce says things like, oh, they were here to send me a message. How come they didn't stop and help you out? It literally makes no sense why Bruce didn't go after Jen and why didn't the ship go after Jen. If this followed the origin story, Jen was found by the cops and was brought to the hospital so that the second stage of her origin story could occur. Now, I will say, like before, Jen, in the beginning of her transforming the She-Hulk for the first time, she would sporadically wake up, powered down from that state because she doesn't really know how to control it right now. It's running on instinct. Because what the Hulk powers do is increases everything. Increases anger, fear. So it's a rush. Now, in Jen's case, because she doesn't have the multiple personality problems, over time train and understand what she's doing. And another thing I have to also point out, if it was so easy for Bruce's blood to affect Jen, Stan Lee's cameo in the 2008 movie would definitely have transformed him into a Hulk, but instead it doesn't. So what they do in the second part of the origin story is that Jen has no idea what happened. It's obviously the middle of the night, so it's been at least maybe 5-6 hours since the original car crash. And she's just wandering into this bar, kind of like Terminator 2 style. And this entire scene is filled with dumb all over the place. And I was like, I can't believe they wrote this. She sneaks into this bar and these women find her. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And these women will help her. They just see that she was, anything could have happened to her. She was in a car accident. And the first thing they do is simply dress her up in this garbage stuff. No one is telling her, stay inside, go to the, get the police, call for that. Nothing. They dress her up in this idiotic getup, which makes no sense. If you assume that she was attacked by someone and she was in this horrible predicament, why would you dress her up into something that would be, seen as a prostitute would? That's the worst thing you can do. So the women are acting ridiculous. They're trying to cover up her injuries or whatnot, which makes no sense. She transformed into She-Hulk. You can clearly see that her arms and stuff were all healed because, again, minor injuries, that would just take a couple of seconds to heal. There's nothing really to cover up besides, just washing her face. So they do give her a moment where they let her use the phone and call, and then she calls Bruce. Why does she call Bruce? Of all people, he's just been in the accident. The first thing that she should have done was called her father. He's a police officer. He would have sent someone, a cop thing, immediately over as fast as possible. And another big issue is that they don't even show us her calling Bruce because it doesn't make any sense. I think when the writers realized it, like if she's calling Bruce, he's Professor Hulk. Does he have a phone? Did he go back to the lab? Is he wasting time? It gets worse. The problem is it's extremely predictable of what the story wants to do. They want her to get into a altercation with a bunch of bad people. So everyone acts completely stupid here. We have these women that are dressing her up in this crappy outfit. If I was Jen and I was worried I was in an area that doesn't look so appealing, I would not wear that. I would rather be cold. But instead, she's acting like a complete idiot here and just wears the outfit. And so it's extremely predictable of what they want to do in the scene. A bunch of idiot guys are going to come up to her. She's going to get angry. She's going to transform into She-Hulk. And she's going to beat the crap out of them. I even watched the first episode with a friend. He knew nothing on She-Hulk, bar the times she appeared in the animated shows. Guess what was going to happen through each scene? Came out not liking the show at all. And at the last second, Bruce comes in. This entire sequence makes no sense. The only good thing is that he actually prevented her from attacking them. Because if he didn't come here right now, she would have definitely killed them. This is another thing that I really hated. So all we got from her first time of transforming was they got in a car accident. All we see is that she runs through the forest. She almost attacks a bunch of guys, which again, I'm not saying what they did was okay, but at the same time, she was about to kill them because she wouldn't have known what she was doing. The first time I saw this, the scene is so dark, both me and my friend didn't even see Hulk tackle She-Hulk. We thought she killed the guys and no one brought this up for some reason. In the original origin story, Stan Lee was very smart in how he handled the entire sequence. One, he understood this is a comic book. It has to be an action-adventure story, but at the same time, I'm dealing with a character who has this great strength. This is the first time she's transformed into She-Hulk. She doesn't know what she's doing. He wants to pay off the mob boss scene, and he wants Jen to win. But how do you do it without killing the character? So Stan Lee understood, I can't let her go that far. So he built many different scenarios around the first time she became She-Hulk so that she wouldn't end up, attacking anyone. Well, I'd better forget Doc for a while and figure out a way to prove Trask is guilty. If I only weren't so frail, so powerless. There she is. This is the room. Who? It's time for your medicine, Miss Walters. I don't know you. Where's my own doctor? Why does it take 3 of you to bring my medicine? You ask too many questions, lady, and you ain't gonna like the answers. You're not doctors. Hold her. Let's get it over with. Fast. No! What happened? What hit us? What? How? Look over there. It's a girl, but look at the size of her. Her skin. It's green. It's like she's some kind of She-Hulk. Now, Jen is the first time she is She-Hulk. She actually was already mostly in control of herself at that point. She can speak. She understood that these people were bad, and she wanted to defend herself. Now, Stan Lee wanted to make this feel more raw, more like she was still a regular person. So when she tried to, protect herself from being shot, she grabbed an entire bed and blocked her. And then remember, he didn't want her to kill anyone. So she's in front of people. There's people running around in fear. Not to mention they coined her name here, which in the entire pilot, no one says She-Hulk once. Is this going to become the whole Fantastic Four movie where they don't say it until the end and they cut it off anyway? So with Stan Lee, what he did was, people are getting in her way. They go down an elevator. She rips open the door. Like every which way, the mob guys were one step ahead. And then when Jen finally catches up to them, she was in front of cops. So her instinct of being a lawyer kicked in, and she made them confess that you were trying to kill Jennifer Walters. They confessed in front of the cops. She threw them in front of the cops, Spider-Man style, and she jumped away. So not only do we get a really cool action sequence, you get She-Hulk developed, you understand who, like, wow, she can control herself. She's not Bruce. She's pretty much there, although she's kind of stumbling in areas here, but she was doing a good job. That's the thing I hated about this. The one thing that I really enjoyed was that Jen figured out all this stuff alone. She didn't need Bruce. And frankly, when they added Bruce here, which again, I'm not saying I didn't want Mark Ruffalo a part of the series. Of course, he should have been a part of the series. But all of this, fun action adventure moment is all gone. We go from a hospital gunfight to barely anything here. So Jen wakes up and we find out that Hulk has created this kind of secret sanctuary of where he lives, and we find out Tony has helped him. Now, this is a common thing in the comics all the time. Bruce has made underground labs to try to figure out how to control himself or to remove the Hulk powers completely. Now, the only difference is that Tony helped him versus Rick Jones would have helped him if they had the character exist. So we find out that somewhere in Mexico, Bruce has this sanctuary. Again, I don't mind this, but it brings up several issues. So it's like Bruce has resources, he has a lab, and again, he's Professor Hulk now. It's not like he's in hiding. I'm assuming S.H.I.E.L.D. and everyone know where he is. They can contact him for any research, and he has ways to either get things repaired or brought to him to continue on. So, for the most part, he's living a normal life. Yes, of course, he still has limitations because, again, he's Professor Hulk. He's still not an average human being, but he's 90% way more better off compared to what he was before. Now, there are issues here. Now, because you introduced us to the whole inhibitor thing, even though it was destroyed, Jen obviously would want herself to be turned back to normal. Anyone would want that. You didn't, all of a sudden, you were turning into this giant green monster. Not that many people would want to be that way. Now they go into this back and forth argument with the whole, I can't make you an inhibitor because it was an experimental thing. It was tuned to myself. It could take years for me to figure out how to do it on you. And we go this back and forth argument. And I'm saying to myself, what does it matter? Right now, Jen has turned into this monster. She doesn't want to be this monster. So she will do anything to not turn into She-Hulk again. This is another reason why the origin in the comic works better, because if Bruce wasn't here and she was alone, Jen did not have that many people to help her in the first comic. In fact, her father was against her because he didn't know Jen was She-Hulk at the time. He thought, oh my God, there's another Hulk character out there. Is she going to be as horrific as Hulk is? Because again, no one understands Hulk. Everyone just sees him as this horrible monster, and he's attacking people while he's not doing that at all, and he's trying to save lives. So we have that fiasco, and she only has one person that actually knows who she is and trusts her. But other than that, it's just like she has to figure out everything on her own. She has no choice. The TV series now has this choice where I want you to make the inhibitor. I want you to help me. And everyone's just like, no, for no reason. It's just because the story has to keep going. But what's more annoying is that this 5 to 6 minute scene is them going back and forth. I want you to make the inhibitor. I can't make the inhibitor. It'll take years and whatnot. And he's trying to convince her, you're a superhero now. You should start training and understanding your powers. While we're having this argument, if they actually adapted, say, issue 2 from the comics, we would have had an interesting action scene. In the second issue, she had to save one of her friends, Jill, from a disaster. Her car, I think if I remember correctly, her brakes were broken and she was going out of control. Jen saw that she was heading onto the on-ramp of traffic on a highway. So she had to figure out a way to not only stop Jill in time, she was already past her, she couldn't catch up to her in that moment. So she had to jump to the highway, block off all the traffic, prevent them from continuing on, stop a bus, which is what gives us that dramatic cover shot in issue 2, and then save Jill at the last possible second. It's a really cool action scene, and it showcases Jen figuring out how she can control her powers. She has to use enough strength to stop the bus, but not destroy the bus and kill everyone on it.
Kinetic factors.
Another issue I had with this scene is that Bruce is assuming too many things and it makes him look stupid. Now the thing in here, they're trying to explain how, like, why is Bruce and why is Jen are able to turn into Hulk and She-Hulk, and that they have a special, their DNA is slightly different where it accepts the gamma radiation. That's the reason why Bruce wasn't killed by the gamma bomb originally, like while most people would have. And they were trying to set it up so that they're unique characters that could only do this, which is not true. Leader in the comics is pretty much able to make anyone a gamma monster, and it's fairly easy for mostly anyone to turn into a Hulk character. It doesn't even matter if you're a mutant, like say from the X-Men, or even like, you know, Spider-Man. So this nonsense is not important. And the thing that I hated the most is that when Bruce was testing Jen out of how she responds to powers, and he was shocked that she was able to retain her personality and everything right from the get-go. And he's like, I don't understand why. And then it's like, you don't have multiple personalities. And I'm saying to myself, Bruce, the reason why you have multiple personalities is because you went through a horrific, traumatic event. Your father murdered your mother. You hated him. You've been through tons of garbage. You were turned into the Hulk. You were hunted by Ross. Very few people respect you, and you've been through horrific shit. So of course you have multiple personalities in you, Hulk and Mr. Fix-It. That's the reason why you cannot control yourself. Jen didn't really go through anything. Like I said in a previous video, the only thing that really happened to Jen was that she lost her mother, which they screwed up in the show.
Don't worry, I talked to your parents. They know we're okay.
She's dead. Now, speaking of characters, the one thing that I have to really point out, Jen in the comics has different personalities, not split personalities from Jen and She-Hulk. The difference is that Jen, when she was growing up and when she became a lawyer, she always kept to herself. She didn't want to be the outspoken person. I've said this in the video before. She didn't want to be the center of attention. And when she became She-Hulk, she gained all these great powers. She became a celebrity. So she would, use that to her advantage. Over time, she would eventually appreciate these powers and love them. So she became more fun and energetic when she becomes She-Hulk versus, all right, I'm as regular Jen. She's more reserved because, again, her lawyer training. So she has two different sides to her. In the TV series, Jen is Jen both ways. There's no discerning difference at all.
Jen, what is it? What do you...
The thing also that I really hated the most is that when we have these moments where Bruce is trying to help Jen and try to explain her situation that she's in, she can't go back being her regular self. He's been trying to do it for years, and now her world has changed, and we're having an emotional moment. Like, her life is changed. To herself, she's like, my life is over. I can't be a lawyer. I can't do what I wanted to do in life. And then we cut to the scene when she's inside that test chamber. Then all of a sudden she's cracking jokes. This is another example of where I was like, did two people write this? There is no balance between the emotional scene we just had before until the next scene where she's about to get, chopped up in half by saws. This is the problem with getting the comedy right. There should have been a moment where when Bruce put her in the chamber, she just said, I'm really doing this? And he's like, yes, you have to, because we have to understand how your powers work. What level to trigger her this way and that way. He scientifically still has to understand how this process works. But they're treating it as this dumb thing where she's like, oh, just show me a Pixar movie. It's just like, one, the comedy is very bland / not even funny, but it's completely inappropriate for the scene.
All of my steps through my evolution.
Another thing they were also trying to do with Bruce is that, we're going to go on to a 15-year journey on, figuring out how to have you control your powers. And I'm saying to myself, Bruce, You went through all that because you didn't have help, one, which you would have had help if they didn't cut out Rick Jones, but anyway. And you were running from your life. You were running from Ross. You were unfortunately used by the Avengers. So he was being used for those 15 years. Jen is not going to go through the exact same process. You're assuming too much of what you've been through that Jen will go through. One, you are helping her. So there's no reason for her to go through a ton of hell. She didn't grow up the way you did, and she's not going to be fighting Ross like you did. And plus, you understand the powers very well. So she should pretty much figure out how to do these things fairly easily with your help. It's ridiculous that you were constantly pissing her off for no reason. That's the thing I hated. The way they were making Bruce, he was acting stupid in so many different ways. He was just trying to be like, oh, you're going to do the exact same thing that I went through. And I'm like, no, you're not. And it's completely against the Bruce character in general and yes, Bruce kind of sucks with, being with people because, again, he's been trying to avoid, being with people. And Rick and Betty, I don't want to belittle Betty at all. She's very important to Bruce as a friend, as a lover, as, a companion, same as Rick. They're two people that try to help, Bruce in any which way they can. It's unneeded nonsense. He's a genius. He would be more interested in how her biology works versus trying to train her in this way. In fact, it doesn't even make any sense realistically. What really should happen here, if Bruce believes that Jen loses control just like him, just say that for example, he should be calling Doc Samson. He's the one who should be talking to her and for the mental aspect of it, because he's the one who's trained in psychology. For all the crap I give Hulk Agents of Smash, they handled this better when they brought in Doc Samson to try to help Scar. Now, I've talked about this portion in the video before, but let me reiterate. This entire training sequence does not work. It's the wrong way. Again, Hulk characters are incredibly strong. A boulder means nothing to them. So when Bruce is trying to showcase, like, all right, lift up this boulder and throw it over here, it should have been more about accuracy. What really should have happened in this sequence is that Jen should have thrown the boulder out of view. Instead, Bruce is the one who does that, which I don't understand why they added the fire effect. I was like, that's overboard. That's more applicable to Superman. The reality of is that Bruce should have been teaching Jen, I want you to hit this target over here. She should have thrown the boulder, and over time, it would have been, less and less power, and eventually she should have hit the target. Instead, it's the other way around. It makes no sense. This is another example of the training that makes no sense. Hulk and She-Hulk can lift, hundreds of thousands of pounds. I mean, their upper limits are really not in detail, but lifting themselves is meaningless. So them doing this whole yoga thing makes no sense. One, again, Hulk should be lifting him up his finger, and She-Hulk is clearly showing him she understands yoga in the first place. This is wasting time of a training montage. And I still hate this scene where Bruce pushes Jen off. Again, Bruce has gone through so much crap. He shouldn't be treating Jen like this at all. But then Jen, at the same time, shouldn't be also being a dick toward him, too. Understandably, Jen doesn't want to be a superhero. Again, these powers were thrown on you. She just wants to be a lawyer. That's what she's good at. She doesn't want to do any of this weird crap. And Bruce, in his right, he's saying, look, just because you don't want to use these powers, it doesn't matter that whether you do it or not. At some point or another, because you have these abilities, you're going to run into a situation where a friend is in danger of losing their life. A disaster is happening around you. You're going to stand there and realize you can do something about it, and you will use those powers in that moment. It will happen. It happens all the time with every superhero. Whether they like the powers or not, they will always run into a point where they're going to have to use them. And Bruce is trying to help her understand that. Okay, now I know this scene kind of confused some people. People were like trying to point out, oh, there was a mistake here. However, this is the one of the few things they got right with the Hulk abilities. Now, okay, let me explain this. because Hulk and She-Hulk weigh a lot. You know, Hulk 1,200 pounds, She-Hulk 700 pounds. Hulk and She-Hulk can metabolize a lot of amounts of alcohol because they weigh a lot. However, there's a catch. If you power down from your Hulk state before the alcohol is absorbed in your body, it's going to still be in there when you're your regular self. That's when you're going to pass out. That's when you're going to get the hangover, and that's when you're going to get the drunk. They didn't explain that properly when they showed Jen later on having a hangover after the scenes, because again, she doesn't fully control her powers, and she turns back to her regular self after she sleeps. They weren't thinking about that, while Bruce is simply Professor Hulk this entire time. Oh, that reminds me, the whole thing about Bruce being called Smart Hulk in the show when he's supposed to be referred to as Professor Hulk, it made no sense.
Yeah, I didn't come up with it. You never have a choice with these names.
You clearly don't like being called Smart Hulk, and obviously the correct term is Professor Hulk, but I mean, you could just call yourself Hulk. Like, he's being forced somehow. Like, is Hulk an NPC? Did this turn into that movie with Ryan Reynolds in it all of a sudden? Like, what? Like, he's like, I have to keep the name and I don't like it. It's like, pick your name. What on earth is going on here? Like, all these little things add up over time where Bruce is not acting like himself. He's overly jokey when this is supposed to be a serious, situation. Jen is, going through a lot of crap herself, but then she's acting all funny. It's like, whenever they get to a dramatic moment, it's just like, oh crap. We don't want to delve into really dark territory. Let's throw in a joke here. Let's throw in a joke here. It'll be funny. Ha 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 ha. Just like when Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, he made Bruce Campbell punch himself. And I was like, that wasn't funny. The guy didn't do anything wrong. America Chavez took something and she was supposed to pay. So why did he punch him? Now, this is the scene that destroyed both Bruce and Jen for me, and why I don't want to watch the rest of the series. This goes completely against both characters.
Here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. When I'm catcalled in the street, pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or I might just literally get murdered.
Before I want to say what I want to say, there are people that go through a lot of crap, and Jen is saying those things. I don't have a problem bringing up real life issues in a comic book story. The problem is, this was the wrong way to do it. One, the first thing, Jen's personality does not allow this. But the biggest reason why is that Bruce has gone through hell, absolute hell. Bruce is living in an endless sea of lava, which just his pain from his horrific life growing up, to his loss of his mother, his horrific father, and day after day after day of being attacked by Ross, who didn't give a crap at what Bruce was going through. He saw a giant green monster and wanted him dead or to be experimented on. At the same time, Bruce is fighting every second to get Hulk in control. Now, Hulk, again, he has his own intelligence. But at the same time, he works under emotions. So he does things that endanger people. So Bruce, while he never can control Hulk under normal circumstances, he's in there trying to talk to Hulk, like, you shouldn't do this. And that's the resentment that Hulk has toward Bruce. Because again, Hulk is, he's a split personality, and he's just living in someone else's body. Same thing vice versa with Bruce being in there too, and Mr. Fix-It. So he's gone through a horrific thing. So when Jen said this to Bruce, she insulted him. He's gone through horrific things. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm saying, oh, brush it off. This doesn't matter because, Jen was catcalled. Absolutely not. What she's gone through is bad too. But you wouldn't want Bruce to say things like this toward you. Both characters should never, ever fight. That's the one thing that Bruce and Jen did. They are a very close family. And the reason why that it hurts the most is that when Bruce gave her her powers, he was devastated. He was like, oh my God, I just did, I gave her what I was. Now she's going to be seen as a monster from people. She's going to be, she can go insane because everyone's just going to be horrible. I just doomed her life. So he didn't know anything for a whole year until Jen came up, because again, she's in California, he's on the run. He has no idea what's going on. Eventually, Jen and Bruce finally talked. And Jen was like, no, what you gave me, I love. It was one of the few times that Bruce's powers was such a, it was such a positive aspect in someone. The powers are not being used in any negative way. It helped Jen become even more better at her job because she can use this newfound power and celebrity in a positive light, whether monetary or in, attracting, better law firms, better lawyers, improve her job, move herself up in there. So in return, out of all the hell that Bruce has gone through, that sea of lava that burns him daily, there's 3 lights in the sky: Rick Jones, Betty Ross, and Jen Walters. So when Jen yelled at him like this, disrespecting him, I was like, you destroyed the character for me, because she was supposed to be one of the positives in his life. If you wanted to talk about, women being abused in various ways, and you want to showcase these things, why isn't it like, be in a court case? Why isn't Jen dealing with, say, a woman? And you could have given this element to her where she Jen has become this kind of popular superhero. She knows her, and she wants to take advantage of her celebrity and be like, Jen, you got to help me. I've been through this horrible thing. And Jen wanted to help her in any which way she can. This way, we would see a lawyer case, and it wouldn't, because, Jen doesn't have to always, deal with superhuman law, meaning like villains and heroes and all that. She can daddle with regular issues, and it would have been a perfect place. You would have gotten what you wanted to talk about, giving that comeuppance to the people who did her wrong. And it would have been perfect, because it would have given you a court case episode. It would have shown Jen in a positive light, and you would never have belittled Bruce here at all. The way I would have done this, even if you wanted to do this scene, I would have had Jen or Bruce, either or. Jen had gone off and Bruce had gone off back at her, and then both stop midway and go, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I don't know why I said that to you. I shouldn't have said that to you. I know you've been through horrible crap. Because what's annoying the most, later on when she decides to leave, she knows that Bruce has been through hell. She says it later on, and it's just like nothing occurred here. It was just like, me, screw you.
Hiding away on some remote beach with no friends, no relationships, never seeing your family, and definitely not dealing with a decade's worth of trauma?
It really aggravated me, and I was like, this is not the character. This is not Jen Walters. This is not She-Hulk. Now, this is the second dumbest sequence. Okay, now Jen has decided, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of this. I want to go back to my regular life, blah, 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 blah. It's been a couple of months at this point, even though the passage of time really doesn't make any sense, because, again, this entire episode is so truncated. It feels like we've only been here a few days. There's no real good enough montage, no evolution of the characters that feel like we really had gone through a couple of months of crap. It's just like Jen wakes up, she just figures out how to use her powers and whatnot. Honestly, I really wish Bruce was not in the episode, because he was just so mishandled at this point, and then you insult him on top of it. I wish he was just not here. I wish he had just been taken from the Sakaar ship and disappeared, and Jen would have had done everything alone. It would have probably worked better. The main issue what I have is that Bruce should have just let her go. If Jen really wanted to, not deal with these powers and whatnot, he would have been like, fine, you want to go, you want to have your life, go right ahead. and she would have just, experienced it just like how Parker did. Remember how, Peter got his powers for the very first time, and Uncle Ben was, said his famous lines, with great power comes great responsibility, and Parker went overzealous. It's like, I have all these powers. Who gives a crap about some random dude who stole this money and whatnot? And like, I don't have to be a hero. And then what happened? Uncle Ben died. Peter had this horrific, moment where it's like, oh my God, what I just did was I caused my uncle to die because I was selfish and I had these powers and I didn't do anything with it. He knows Spider-Man. He knows all the Avengers. He knows what they've all been through. He should have simply let her go. Instead, you have this idiotic sequence where Bruce is holding on to the car. Now, okay, before anyone says it, the car is designed specifically to hold Hulk's weight. However, it's the way they do this is ridiculous. Okay, right now, he's holding on to the car. That car ain't going to go nowhere. At the end of the day, while the car can easily, lift Hulk up, it's retrofitted to hold and withstand 1,200 pounds and deal with his strength to a degree, he still has to be very careful with it because it's still a standard steering wheel and it's still a standard pedal that Jen can obviously use as a regular self. Because if it was reinforced to be Hulk, to be strength of Hulk, she wouldn't be able to move nothing at that point. So obviously it's still tuned to be able to be used by humans because it makes sense. If Bruce, for some reason, was blocked by being used as his powers and he needs to get out of this area quick, it's his only getaway. So it has to be functional by both Hulk and his Bruce self. Bruce is holding on to the car, and then she accelerates, hits him. The car hit a guy who's 1,200 pounds. The car should not have moved. In order for Hulk to be knocked off his feet, it requires either him being hit by a missile or have a large explosion happen after him. The car is not going to push him like this. And then on top of it, he gets thrown into a wall 40 feet. The only way this would have occurred if the car could accelerate to a couple hundred miles an hour and ram him. Ironically, let's go back to the comics. Jill died in issue 2 because Jen was knocked out of the way by a car. But unlike the show, Mike Vosberg and Anthony Kraft put thought into this sequence. They had the guy use a high-speed car going at full speed down a highway, as well as Jen being distracted to stop Jill's car. Even after all that, Jen is only knocked a few feet away from her position. She recovers in a second, then tries to save Jill. Handled way better in this. They just completely disregarded this sequence and they treated Hulk as a regular human being. All for what? The entire episode has basically no action sequence because, again, since they didn't want to do the origin story, we got no action sequence. So what did they have to do? A contrived fight. That's the reason why Bruce was acting the way he was, and that's why Jen was acting the way she was, so that they both have a reason to have this stupid, pointless fight, which is wrapped up in seconds, because there's not enough time. So even if I was okay with them fighting, which I'm not, the one thing Bruce and Jen will not do is fight each other. They respect each other very much. They are family. It would be like Bruce fighting Rick Jones. It would be like Bruce fighting Betty. He does not want to do that under any circumstances. The only time they ever fight is if either one is, mind controlled, tricked by some sort of power, and that has happened many a times where She-Hulk has gone insane and nearly killed the Avengers. In fact, if they had not skipped the whole Planet Hulk stuff, because, I've been talking about Planet Hulk and what Bruce has gone through in the original comic book story, but I never told you about what happened with Jen during that point. Now, I had said the Illuminati were the ones who voted Bruce to be exiled off Earth. Obviously, they couldn't tell Jen what was going on, and that includes Tony. At the time when the Planet Hulk happened, he was dating her on top of it, which was extremely insulting. And when Jen found out that the Illuminati were the ones responsible, I was very close in being okay with Jen almost killing Tony. She was that pissed off where she would have easily killed him. Would it have been right? No, of course not. But at the same time, I wanted Tony to pay for what he did. Reed and everyone else who was involved, etc., etc. And Tony developed a gamma radiation inhibitor, so Jen was forced to power down, and she didn't have her powers. Oh, but she did get back at Tony and Reed Richards in many damning ways, because again, Jen has been a lawyer for both Tony and Reed in many cases. So she royally screwed him and sued their asses off, cost them millions upon millions. She financially damaged the both of them in various ways. So yeah, when I say Jen and Bruce will not fight each other unless there's an extreme circumstances, like World War Hulk, for example, they are a team, they are a family. And this is another sequence that I freaking hated. Because again, it was just action's sake for action's sake and not really any compelling reason why they did this. And it amounts to nothing. All it does is that they destroy like a ton of crap on Bruce's place. And it was fairly predictable because they were kind of setting up like, oh, he's telling you all this information about like this and da-da-da-da-da. Before I even saw this fight, I was like, let me guess. Are they going to make Bruce and Jen fight because there was no action in this show at all? Instead, we get this lame fight that was over within like a minute or two. And they were like, we're sorry, I'm sorry, let's make up, blah, blah, blah. I was like, there was no tension. There was no nothing. It felt extremely contrived. So basically, Bruce was like, okay, you can go back to your regular life. And then we jump back to present time where we finally get to see, Jen go through the closing court proceedings. There's really no clue of what this case was about. I was trying to look through the issue to see, like, are they referencing any? So, and then all of a sudden we get introduced to Titania. I've always pronounced her Titania, but her name could be pronounced Titania or either or. Titania comes in for something. We don't even know what it was for. She doesn't even know who Jen is, so obviously she wasn't even after her. She was for something. We don't really know. I'm assuming it's an involvement of like these people who are getting superpowers out of nowhere. It must be involved there. They're probably going to set something up. But the thing that sucked the most, like, this is our first time Jen is going to fight as She-Hulk, right? So you think we're going to get like, oh, this cool fight, and, they're going to punch each other through walls and go into the middle of the street and have an action scene out there. No, we have stupid all over the place. First, Titania barges through the wall with not really great CG. I didn't even speak of that, actually. Like I've said before, the reason why people complain about the CG, and I know 8 visual effects companies worked on She-Hulk. I looked at all the end credits. There's a ton of people working on it. I don't want to like insult these people, but at the same time, you can clearly see they are rushing in the animation department because the animation is the most key element of a CG character. That's what changes it from uncanny valley to believability. If you fail to make the face work, and there's a lot of instances where Jen's face does not work as She-Hulk properly, meaning her mouth is just wrong.
Natasha, for a little while, would tell me a lullaby.
Even the physics when like Bruce is working with the booklet, because a lot of stuff has to be CG, and you can feel the physics, the gravity. It doesn't feel right. You can see that something is wrong. Something doesn't feel right. That's why people have this issue with her CG. It feels incomplete, like they just did not get enough time to the animations to make them work good. So, okay. Titania barges in. We have no idea what she's after, who she's after. And we have this like 2-minute sequence where we find out that Nikki, for some reason, knows she's She-Hulk. And he's like, go change into She-Hulk and fight her and da-da-da-da-da. And Jen is like, oh, I have to do that now? Everyone's going to see me change into this character. And then she's like, Titania is just standing there doing absolutely nothing in the background while they're having this entire conversation. And 2, this would have been a perfect moment where this horrific situation just had happened, and Instead of having this dumb conversation, oh, I should transform and da-da-da or not, she should have simply went into her head for that split moment, flashed back into what Bruce had said, and then realized he was right. And then she goes and fights her. So we finally get the big moment where Jen transforms into She-Hulk for the very first time. The world now knows her. And what do we get?
No!
We get the crappiest wire work. So I don't know what's going on here. Either they were being completely cheap here, or they intentionally made this look bad. Why? I don't know. This is supposed to be a dramatic moment for Jen to finally fight someone, and not only that, it's over within 10 seconds. And I'm like, what? Huh? This is the first time we see Titania, and we're gonna see her be a threat, be a menace, and it should have been like a really interesting, cool fight where, neither one wins, and then, Jen knocks her out of the building, and she like, oh, I can't do this right now, blah, 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 and then she disappears, and we just, start off with that mystery, and then now Jen is like that. No, instead, she just punches her once, and then she's in the wall and knocked out, and that's it. That's the end of it. That's our action sequence. And if you're wondering if there's a post-credit scene, yes, there is, and it's just literally a wrap-up of that stupid, pointless obsession that Jen has with Steve Rogers, and where Bruce is like, yeah, Steve has slept with women before during himself on tour. And I was like, no, really. The cool thing that I will say is that it was nice. The credits had these nice artwork over the credits where we see, various things of like what happened to like, does Bruce fix the door? When She-Hulk, becomes known to the people, a lot of people like to take photos with her. That happens with a lot of superheroes. Many people like to take photos with Spider-Man and whatnot if they ever get a chance. So Jen is just like walking around a lot of times, or she's exercising. A lot of people come up there and ask her to take a photo. It's the only time that Jen feels like She-Hulk, that the show feels like it. They're referencing here and there, but it's like the show itself, no. From characters making no sense, the alteration of the origin story, breaking a ton of things, having all this illogical nonsense, and the worst thing, it being so truncated into 35 minutes, you could not tell a story very well. And then you had all this other nonsense that has to be built up in the background. I wish they had taken their time. They needed a 2-hour movie, basically, for Savage She-Hulk. And I said it before in my other video. I don't have a problem with them skipping Savage, but you can integrate it in other ways. Like I said, you can use the Arrow aspect where we can flash back to Savage She-Hulk days and you'll show that time. The funny thing, though, if you read the end credits, you can actually see that they do credit all the writers from Savage through Dan Slott's runs. I mean, they could still technically do a couple of the villains from Savage She-Hulk, like Man-Elephant, for example. 1 or 2 little bits of Savage She-Hulk are in here, and 80% of it is basically Sensational She-Hulk from John Byrne, and then there's like 10 or 15% of, Dan Slott's elements, because they do take elements from Dan Slott's run with the whole Superhuman Law thing. They use that they grafted on there. So it's amalgamation of 3 different comic book series into one. And the writers, there was an article that even said the writers, like, I didn't read anything of She-Hulk. It's just like, how can you work on a show and not understand, a comic book hero? Currently, right now, there's only 169 issues minus various other things. So again, if you wanted to argue 173, 74, I could tell you right now, I did this before because I wanted to see how long it would take. I read every single She-Hulk issue up to Mariko Tamaki's run, because I didn't buy the series since then, and it took me like 2 weeks. I've read this character since I was 7, so it was a good refresher course of like, oh, the person who wrote this and produced this, they didn't really know the character. They were told the basis of the character, and they probably do have a consultant, but then either like you can't do this, you can't do that, this doesn't work, we have to do this, we have to introduce Scar, or at least the elements from there that will get there. We're setting up something in the background that probably pertains to a future movie, or like the Kang Dynasty or the Secret Wars, something. I was hoping I would be wrong, but unfortunately not. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I, broke down as much as I could to try to give you a glimpse to what the character. I always said, out of, Jen, She-Hulk was one of those characters, lightning in a bottle, that everyone really enjoys. And I wish the MCU had given Hulk more of a chance, because most people just see him as this joke character, or like completely unimportant character, which, Bruce could be a very cool character on his own if given a chance. And then Jen, unfortunately, is just like a mess all over the place that just didn't help.